Hi, good afternoon. So the tough part of today is that the five of us have to keep everybody here engaged before we can talk about AI. We were just talking about the 3 o'clock session. It's probably got to be really hard. But I hope you guys, will be able to bear with us and give us some time of just listening. So I'm just going to quickly get to it. It's an interesting time. So when I look at it from a business perspective, and we were talking about this earlier, a brand that sells a sandwich for 25 rupees, how do you get efficiency and how do you get productivity? It's a tough time for businesses. And at the end of the day, you still have to, we're a people business. You work with people all the time. And you still have to bring efficiency, you still need productivity. All of these problems are becoming so challenging. How are you going to make it happen within the costs and budgets that you're allocated? And it's an interesting dilemma because as management, the first thing you want to cut is all your people expenses because, I can't see ROI there. So what we're going to do is just very quickly kind of talk to both Amit and Rahul around products that they do, and also Manmeet and Shibu around the challenges they face as HR professionals, and how can we bring efficiency into making sure people are engaged, because the one thing we know is engaged people actually give you the profitability. So we've been on the Great Places to Work top 50 companies for the last 4 years. And I can promise you the first year was not pretty when it came to results. But by the fourth year, we've had really, really focused people around making sure that the company achieved its results. So with not much ado, Amit, you want to explain what AI is? Because we talk about engagement all the time. Now, engagement normally means human interaction in my mind. Where does AI come into all this, and what is AI?
Sure. Thank you, Seema. Hello, everyone. So AI, I'll try to be very simple. Of course, not that not anybody knows that, but so AI typically is machines trying to do human work in terms of cognitive intelligence and data analysis, or solving the problems which we normally solve as humans. So, for example, today machines can solve a Rubik cube faster than humans can. So that is kind of an AI. So AI has multiple levels, what can they do? But AI definitely is machines having intelligence which humans normally possess. And they can do things which humans can do typically within a second of time. So that is what AI is all about. So it is actually doing things faster, efficiently, but having that human element. It is not just printing a slip faster, but it is understanding things, making sense of some data which humans can do. What we call as the human element. I think this is right. I think this is not right. I feel. So that the emotional part, the social part, the informal part, if that is being captured by a system, that typically is what AI does. Now, in terms of how it links to the employee engagement, and I think your question is, see, we have to know where we are. So even if it is a very vague or a kind of a gray area to understand very clearly or accurately what is engagement level, but there has to be some way to understand that level, which means you have to measure something. Anything which is measured is data. Anything which is data can be processed in multiple ways. And if you imagine, as a large company which has 10,000 of people, and let's say even if you do a simple engagement survey with 10 questions once in a year, there is so many data points. So if you have to have people sit through the data and understand that beyond the arithmetics of mean, median, and average, that is where I will try to understand how we can use AI to make it better and make sense of that part. So in terms of what I believe, employee engagement is a set of three factors: communication, learning culture, and employee recognition. Now, if you have to understand engagement and you have to identify that and measure that, you have to have ways to measure these three components also, at least these three components. There is much more to that. Now, if you have all of these data sources, and then if you put it through kind of a system, and then there's a lot of data points coming out of the system, then the task is kind of impossible for humans to make sense of the data. For example, let's say if we have a engagement survey, and then we figure out, okay, the score is going down year over year, but what else is happening in the company which can lead to that? the correlation part, the causation part, the data sciences part. So that is where the AI really comes in. How do you make sense of data, not from one single system, but there are so many systems in the company which feel, which understand, which make sense of the employee. You know, if the company's business went down, did the engagement go up or down? Now this, humans can make sense if they look at numbers, but it is a mammoth task. You have to have a team of large number of people to figure out this out in terms of how does this really work. Now this is where AI really comes in. So when you have disparate systems, even today we have systems for performance management, learning management, HR management, even in a communication within the company for people. Now, there are so many places and systems which have data coming out of them. Humans, to make sense of that, will need a lot of time and a lot of manpower. Now, anything which needs these two things can be made easier by computer systems, especially with AI, because AI is beyond simple statistical analysis of data. It is about making sense of data. So, but there are limitations, of course, because one is the number of data points. The second is there is so much of, it is a different world altogether. It is more about statistics, but in a different way. It is data sciences in a different way. Now, AI will help us achieve that objective. So, for example, now I think in terms of how to do that, AI is still a very new concept. There are no ready-made tools. I can't have a tool which says, okay, this tool will help me understand my engagement levels better. It is not possible. But the tech giants, they are readying platforms which already have services available for companies, let's say like us, who are using those services to create tools and technology, who can make use of those services to create a tool to enable the companies to understand how the data is flowing in the company and how to make sense of that. So I think that, in my view, that is kind of how AI can how we can leverage AI. One is, to summarize, one is we have a lot of systems in place, a lot of data points in place, which means to make sense of that from a human angle, it is not possible, or the costs are very high. So we can use AI to reduce that cost and make sense of that. Plus, I think AI will also reduce human bias to a large extent, because they are human in a way, but they're not personal in that way. So that is my 2 cents about that. Thank you.
Wow, so that's actually quite amazing, because I know as an HR person, the toughest part is to actually remove bias from data, especially when it comes to engagement. And it's really hard because you're expected to be that practical soul who's supposed to tell management who's not supposed to be here and who's not, or who's supposed to be here, and at the same time be a bleeding heart, because everyone's going to come and tell you कि मेरे को ये तकलीफ है या वो तकलीफ है. So if that is one use, it's fantastic. What we'll do is move to Shibu. Shibu, you at GE use some part of what Amit just spoke about in terms of data and data predictive analytics to be able to help you with engagement. Can you just tell us a little bit about how do you actually put it into effect?
Sure. So our journey on using AI pretty much started with saying that we have tons and tons of data, and we need to use this data a lot more intelligently to make HR decisions. And we wanted to start with where the rubber meets the road, and it pretty much was that if engaged employees stay and people who disengage were to leave, how can we predict attrition? And that's where the whole piece started, saying, can we have a predictive model on attrition? And we built that model on attrition, and we took it to our people leaders. Until then, they had a very, as Amit was saying earlier, very intuitive, very anecdotal way of looking at attrition. They used to make heat maps and stuff, and we merged the two together so that both were better, so that there's a multi-dimensional, unbiased view to looking at the data. And at the same time, we were not losing out on what is called the tribal knowledge. And we kept refining that model till we thought it was ready to take to the people leaders. When we took it to the people leaders, after that initial high was done, they really came back and said, okay, now that I know that there's a higher probability of ABC leaving, what do I do with it? And that really got us thinking in terms of how can we make this more real for our people leaders to be able to take action. So what we started to do is, on top of this predictive model, we started having a data-driven nudge, so to say, or triggers, which were going real time to the people leaders to say that this is the action that you could possibly take. For example, if the model said that an employee who does not receive a recognition in 6 months' time is more likely to attrite, and then this nudge to the people leader would be something to the effect of, this is your employee who would not, who's going to be hitting the 6-month mark and has not received a recognition. Would you think there is something this employee has done which needs to be recognized? So there was real-time action that a people leader could take with that. So they were a lot more comfortable that now they knew what they needed to do. The next level of the question then came to in terms of, now that I know what I need to do, how do I do it? How do I make sure that I am engaging with my employees in the way which has the maximum impact for them? And so we built on that another piece saying that how do you do it really has to be an answer the employee answers. So let's just go to the employees and ask. And while we initially started with a survey, we piloted with a chatbot in one business, and we had the Infido team talk to us earlier this morning about Amber. And in the other businesses, we went with an app. And it's a very simple app. It has just about 4 or 5 questions. You can customize it. And it basically asks you questions which, when we started out, we asked about things like, how can we make your work richer? How can your current job become your dream job? Or how would you like to be recognized? And we were a little skeptical when we went with it, because it's like, we weren't very sure how employees would react to that. But it was amazing to see the response where they actually wrote back about what they wanted. It was great to hear feedback from the people leaders on how well they could engage in those dialogues with the employees when they got those insights, and then take the action. So it was a good mix of the connect, which the people leader could do, and that the predictive model as well as the triggers were feeding into that connect in a way where the people leaders could become a lot more effective in engaging their employees. A lot of you could say that you could have done this standalone and the other one standalone, and a lot of times that's how we have operated in HR in the past, where we've had our roundtables and connects, and we hit some, we miss some, and then we have a way of looking at our data, but more after the event has occurred than in a predictive manner. When we brought this together is where we found a very powerful way of engaging with our employees, where both data and connect came together.
Wow, that's a really good example. I'm just thinking how soon I can get to Bangalore and actually see this in action.
Come tomorrow.
Tomorrow, no, it's a weekend. I'm not spending it in traffic, Shibu. But thank you so much. You talked about, we've talked about the data part of it. We talked about how do you use the data effectively. Also, how can you get your people leaders to actually start to use that data to take the right actions in a lot of ways. And I think that to me was a really stellar point, which is how do you tell them not only what to do, but also how to do it. Because a lot of the times you realize that people have become people managers at such young ages. They don't really know, and in our country, hierarchy, the entire bureaucracy, the ragging culture, I don't know if it ever goes. So this I'm sure really helps to break a lot of paradigms when you're looking at it. But Rahul, tell me, how can you? Is there a possibility of actually using AI to further improve the experience through a tool? So while the people managers know what to do, how can you still aid them to be able to take the experience of the employee to another level? Because finally, it is the age of personalization and customization. So, yeah.
Sure, sure. So I think in order to have a really engaged workforce, what is important is that all the phases of the life cycle of an employee are addressed. So stages like strategies have to be really put in place to see that stages like recruitment, onboarding, career development, retention, and also separation are addressed. And I think this is an area where AI has a huge role to play in really disrupting the HR function. So we at Agrive HCM are also trying to really implement AI-based solutions in all these areas to really improve the overall engagement levels. So I'll just try to explain one very basic but important area where AI is being very extensively used today, which is in the area of employee self-service. So data shows that the current HR to employee ratio is about 1 to 100. And with companies intending to do more with less, this ratio is only bound to increase. So if that happens, it would be almost impossible for HR staff to contribute anything strategic to the organization. So this is where I think leveraging AI, is going to really disrupt the space. Data also shows that 50% of all questions that are put to HR staff pertain to processes, procedures, or information that is generally readily available in some document. So generally, so what today's AI-powered bots are really enabling us to handle thousands of these requests parallelly and instantly, which is really improving the productivity of HR teams. And also because with the advances in natural language processing and different techniques in NLP like sentimental analysis and data modeling, we're also able to make the interaction very the conversation very human-like, which again is helping in improving the overall experience. And also basic questions like how many leaves do I have, what insurance policy am I on, or any basic questions can be answered instantly, thereby eliminating the need for an employee to actually go through a portal or log in a help request or go through some documentation, which really spoils the employee experience. So like I said, this is an area that I'm sure most of you are familiar with because it's being used very extensively. But in addition to this, I think across the life cycle, starting from a recruitment where AI-powered recruitment can make hiring very transparent, data-driven, and also improve the overall applicant experience, which again helps in the engagement levels. Similarly, I think the second phase where in onboarding, I think, which plays a very crucial role in the retention of an employee, can also be automated very extensively using AI, thereby again improving the overall experience. Thirdly, I think in the area of career development, I think AI-based, database decisions can be taken with respect to learning and development and career succession needs of an employee, making it very personalized, again helping in the overall engagement levels. And another area, key area is I think retention, which is very crucial for a company. So by collecting qualitative data through our bots, we are able to really use different techniques of NLP to find the key pain areas of all these employees and really give them solutions in real time, thereby again really improving the experience. And when this is coupled with the performance data that we have, we're able to also predict the turnover of your top performers. So to conclude, I'd want to say that for AI systems to really add a lot of value to organizations, it's important that we have more organization-specific data. So the sooner we adopt these technologies, I think the better the results are going to be for organizations.
Thanks, Rahul. All this talk of data, actually, as an HR professional, one part of me actually looks at it and says, are we going to be run by machines? And really, do I have a job in 5 years? Which is a very critical question. Because, what do I need to do to be different and still leave the human element in? Manmeet, you've worked in tech companies pretty much through your career, right? One assumes that you guys are probably up there and in front of all the AI solutions you can find from an HR perspective. How have you kept the human element still in the HR function?
I think that ends up being a very big question when we are talking about that confluence between there is all of this data, there is all of this information. I can just go ahead and say, Alexa, answer this question for me, and you have what you need. But now at PhonePe, when we are a small organization that's growing very rapidly, I think the biggest challenge that we have is how to use technology to scale and do what my leaders, my HR business partners are already doing at a very small level. An HR person or a business person today is very well connected with the organization. So an employee in the organization doesn't need to worry about what is going to happen to his career, whether his strengths are going to tie into the opportunities, is his long-term interest in taken into account, because there is that individual connect. To me, the power of AI would really be in being able to make those connections using predictive analysis, figuring out
what are the tools that you can hand over to the managers so they can be better managers? What is the information that the HR business partners need so that from the solving the problem perspective, they are able to deal with issues with empathy. They are able to look at problems with kindness and with that specific individual customization. The role of AI in a lot of ways is going beyond what the data is able to provide, the patterns that data can help build, and instead go back to, okay, all of this is great, but intuitively, these are the right solutions, and data validates for me. AI, with its patterns, is able to confirm to me that what we are trying to work towards is the right thing. From my point of view, being able to start with a very, very clear definition of the problem that I want to work with on AI would be the first step to figure out where we want to go with this. Then leveraging the expertise that exists in the market today across various different products so that I'm not reinventing the wheel. And then once those two pieces are there, going off then to learn and experiment to figure out what the long-term right solutions for me are. Those are, I think, the three things, the direction that we'd like to take at PhonePe.
So net, what you're telling all of us is that we all have to learn technology.
And not to lose our empathy in the process.
I'll just add to that a bit, Seema. In terms of where do you use technology, and we are all HR professionals, I guess the way I've seen it work well, and I may be wrong, and we'll hear from the audience more, is that when we get around to digitizing, we've seen great benefits when you're adding technology to either the scalability or the sustainability of something. When it comes to creating moments that matter, you can leverage your data, but the human connect is very critical. So, and both are not mutually exclusive. They can actually go well with each other. So that's my 2 cents on how I've seen that work out.
And also, just to add, so in fact, as let's say in an ideal world, or not an ideal world, but where AI is actually more powerful, we'll have to learn less technology because systems will do so much of work. We will have to focus on human skills, which I think we don't get time for them today. So if I spend my 10 minutes in filling a form, it is of no real value to, the value to the business. So if that can be removed and the system can do its job automatically, and then there are AI things which are, so AI has to be, it will become very pervasive in a way because it has to touch every piece of business to really make sense. If we just make sense of HR data, if we don't have finance data, we don't have business data, it doesn't really, tie in all together. So in my view, AI will help us reduce our involvement with technology because it will do its own work, but we'll have to focus on human aspects. So machines will not replace humans, but they will kind of make us do things which we are supposed to do more humanly.
All right, so thank you guys. I mean, I think, at least for me, it's one, I'm breathing again because I still have a job. But the bigger thing I think is, what I take away from all of them is that, at the end of the day, we've all become very, very technical when it comes to what we do with people and engaging people in the job. A lot more governance, a lot more paperwork, a lot more, the day of induction, 6,525 forms that the per candidate has to fill. The question is, how do you now go back to really being pure HR professionals? And I think that's the answer that AI will bring in because it's more effective, it's more efficient. And you know what, the honest thing is it is more unbiased. So it's no longer about what you think or feel, but actionability happens based on fact. So yeah, with that, I'm going to open it up for questions if there are any with the panel. Wow, okay, yes. Right there at the back.
Hi, this is Akash Nagpal. And a quick question to the panel is, being what is going to pay more, technically human or humanly technical? We talked about data, we talked about AI, we talked about being human. So technically human or humanly technical? What will pay more?
I actually don't understand the difference between the two. I would say being a human is a given, you already are. So being technically savvy and using your data well is going to be critical. But I'll leave it to the others who may have understood the difference better than me.
There was something I was reading very recently that talked about The fact that we tend to think of ourselves as right-brained and left-brained, and at any given point in time, you're only one. But the truth of the matter is that when you're human, you're actually both. And that's it. You don't actually have to do anything more as long as you remember who you are.
Uh, Srinivas, I'm from TVS. One of the thing which right now the macroeconomic trend, which is kind of I'm from manufacturing industry, it's kind of expected to go south and up and other stuff. Hope it doesn't. But we are talking about the internal environment where we are talking about engaging. But quite a lot of our policies are dependent on how the external market also influences. So will AI also help to predict how the market operates, and how should we gear up our internal employee policies to manage it accordingly? For example, in my case, it's about productivity.
So, Srinivas, I think that it's a tough question, because if there was predictability in the external environment, we wouldn't need so much technology or whatever. We wouldn't have gotten so complicated to start with. So I think it is important to be flexible, definitely, because if you're engaging different age groups, I wouldn't even say generations, right? Everybody has different needs as they're coming into the workforce. Being flexible today is absolutely critical, because people just want different things out of their work life. Sitting and saying that one policy, and especially manufacturing. So I understand it because I run a food business, but it's actually more, a production setup, and productivity is critical. But if you don't make sure people are happy, they're just not going to gear up to do it. So you have to be flexible around what you do. Sorry, there was another question. Yes. Manmeet, you want to take that question?
Yeah, I firstly want to say that I'm not with Amazon anymore. So don't want to take responsibility. I think Deepthi and Raj are going to be here tomorrow, so some of these things can go to them. But I think the approach that went into that was saying that we have a process right now, which is manual, which is through people. Let's translate that into a system. And when we translate it into a system, we realized that there were certain biases that were built into the way humans were operating. And the system just helped surface them. And so we could work out what the solution is around that. Ultimately, your AI solutions are only going to be as good as the people who are designing them. And your corrections to them, your learning from them, is only going to be as good as the people looking out for what the issues might be. The good thing with this stuff is that it's out there. There is all of that data. Variances and unusual things about the data are going to surface automatically. It is going to be up to the humans to say, all right, this is not how we intended it to work. This is not what we were trying to do. AI has given us the data. Let's now fix it. And I think that's kind of the approach that Amazon went with that, circulated that information, and were able to come up with a better way to manage it.
I think any model you build will be an iterative process. So there will be things that, as we heard from Manmeet, which it will throw up some data. You will look at it. There are some things which will come up which may not be logical at all. When we were building our tool, and the team which built it is sitting here, one of the things which came up first was, because we'd started with predictive analytics on attrition, was people who have women leaders tend to attrite more. When we went deeper to see what is it that was happening, it was that people who've had women leaders in the past tend to attrite more. We went deeper again to see what really did it mean. So the question that you have, the way you frame your problem statement, helps you get to the real answer. And the real answer came through when we said, what do the managers who retain employees do differently than the managers who do not retain employees? And then the gender piece went off completely when we looked at the data, because then it came to they recognize more, they give them more growth opportunities. The questions will really help you get to the answer, but you can also end up with a tool in its first iteration and then go ahead with it if you don't keep thinking that you have to keep iterating the product.
Sorry, just 1 second. And see, any system we design, it started with a set of scenarios, which is all what if this goes wrong and what if this goes wrong. So the checks and balances have to be put in the system before it is designed. And that is where the human element comes in. So we have to foresee, okay, this tool might give you more, maybe a gender bias or maybe something else. So we have to, and it is then after that, it is a constant calibration of the tool, because we learn something. And that is, I think going back to the question, humans will have to have that important job of making sure the systems don't go, or they have to be in their place. So that's how it has to be fixed.
So I think we can take maybe another question. I don't know, somebody there. From a time perspective, are we good with one more question? Okay. Okay, whoever. Yes. Whoever has the mic wins.
So I'm Suchita and I'm from the learning industry. So when it comes to AI that we have heard about so much, my question runs around change management. I have seen patterns when a certain age group of our employees are a little hostile towards change, and how AI is transforming that internal change practices, like from 2 years to 1 year, now it is like 6 months, 3 months, and we are expecting them to change as and when the data is coming in. So all these new trends, from an HR perspective, how do I make their life easier? How do I make them better, like a pro at managing that change, taking it, flying with it, and then again unlearn, do something else because AI has given us something more?
So I think one of the critical factors, at least, and I'm just going to take the liberty to answer that question, is it has to be a top-down. Please sit. It has to be a top-down. If your leadership team does not get it, no one's going to get it. They have to recognize there is a need for change. I don't think it's age group specific. I think it is just fear, because I'm not sure what will happen if it takes over. So if the leadership team has a business dialogue, or as the HR professional, the one thing I've learned is have a business dialogue with the management team. Don't try and tell them, don't try and sell an HR concept. So you have to be able to, and I think Shibu touched upon this, which is how is it going to benefit my job as a people manager? The minute I can see it right at the top, automatically I will make sure that that flows down. Change management is a scary word. How do you change the conversation for it becoming aspirational versus it being this whole big animal in everybody's head? Okay, you know what, it's the new thing that's coming and you have to learn how to use the computer, and every day you have to look at this data, and there's a dashboard, and your boss is going to know what you're doing with your people. The minute you do that, you've just killed yourself. So you have to be really cautious. It's a tool at the end of it. My management team has to be able to understand how does it help me, and hence push it down the line for you. Change is a very simple thing. Yeah? The minute you start getting, someone explained it to me very simply from the construction business, right? And they said that at the end of the day, every business has a muqaddam, right? You have to figure out who that muqaddam is, how do you want to get the message through, and then make sure that it flows down from there. They're normally the hardest to change, right? As long as you can make it aspirational for them, and a what's in it for them will always make that work.
Sure.
Yeah?
Thank you so much.
Sorry, does anyone else want to add to that point? Okay. All right. I think we're done with the questions. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Please give them a round of applause for the panel. Really relevant, real-time insights in terms of what they are doing.